Hello, my name is Willow, and I recently completed the certificate in person-centered creative art therapy. And during that process, during the certificate, I became aware of implicit desire to make films. And I realised that I had been wanting to do this for some time and had been playing with animation techniques and also looking at making short video clips using my phone. And I have a deeper seated desire to write a screenplay or along those lines, let's say. There's nothing concrete yet, but I have this feeling within me that that's what I would like to do, that I really enjoy the documentary process of filmmaking. And I think that there is something about using moving images to convey feelings across time and to bring in multiple strands of meaning. So to that end, when I was creating my portfolio, I had been inspired throughout the certificate to create a number of different images. Part of those were to try to illustrate the person-centered process from all the different stages, the 5 stages, from the emerging feeling to the conveying of image to paper, and the way that we work with clients using the core conditions, and then the integration of now explicit knowledge into the client's life and what happens. So those 5 stages, I had felt like I wanted to illustrate those. This is another project I have about illustrating the person-centered theory so that it can be more accessible for students in general, and not just counselling students, but people from different disciplines and professions. So part of the criteria for passing the certificate was about evidencing my own creativity. It was about evidencing art journal activity. It was about really embracing the spirit of the PC CAT approach, which is about allowing one's own actualizing tendency, the freedom to fulfill creativity. So the creative desires are an aspect of the actualizing tendency. And if you're not from a counselling profession and you don't recognise those terms, it's really about understanding the inner drive of the individual to feel fulfilled, to be allowed to explore the true self in an uninhibited way. So I realised that I had been holding back from exploring this desire to make films because I was frightened that I would not be good enough, or that I needed to do a training course and learn the discipline of filmmaking, or that my rudimentary sketches using my iPad to do stop frame animations and things like that were amateur at best. I am an artist, and part of doing the training course really helped me to understand that so much of the art that I produce has been about a perceived audience. So I've been making art to sell. So I've been modifying my creative output to try and meet the perceived demand of an audience who might pay for things. And in doing that, I was putting a value judgment on my innate creativity. And so I recognised that I have nothing to lose by just experimenting. And actually, in some ways, that vulnerability and that freedom to just be an artist, a creative person, without worrying about the aesthetic quality, let's say, it just unlocked this freedom to explore what could happen using the tools I had at my fingertips. So I made a film which incorporated my own drawings and illustrations. It incorporated video clips that I had taken prior to doing the training course. It included learning how to use video editing software that is free. I have an Apple computer, so there was a free program on that. I used a free app for my phone to do stop frame films, which is essentially take photographs of the same thing and then work with the sequence of photos. I used the sort of apps and software that allow you to add music and audio. So my dictaphone from my training days, I recorded a poem. All of these different strands of creativity came together in this film, and I'm going to share that with you now. Hopefully you begin to understand what I am getting at, and then I will go through it in more detail to examine the different processes that I experienced while making it. Okay, let's see if I can make this work for you. Bear with me. Let's see. It says I'm screen sharing. It says share correct screen. I can't see it. Why does this need to be so complicated when we're trying to do this? Close down a load of other things. There it is.
A page of colour and you bring me to a page of colour and shapes. You tell me you don't know where it came from. You want to. I can see it came from you and your mysterious life. I tell you, I am curious. I tell you I am curious and invite you to take me into your world on this page. I want for you to look at what your mind and body made real, and whether you tell me or can't find the meaning and then sit uncertain, blinded by conflicting lights, to see that what you made is acceptable. Your thoughts and feelings and marks made, colours chosen, shapes expressed, are all accepted by me. Everything that you bring is acceptable and accepted by me, in our space, in our boundary. You tell me you felt something when you drew it. You felt something when you drew it, I tell you. Yes, you tell me. It was joy or hatred or confusion, because it was joy or hatred or confusion you felt, I say, offering myself as your reflection, to reflect. The still lake to your ever-changing sky. The shop window glass to your tired, harried face as you walk by. The changing room mirror surrounded by bulbs as you remove your stage makeup. You begin to look at your page in a new way. You take me on a grand journey along the coast, through the valley, over mountains. I hear you mention your highs and lows. You tell me of the sun rising, the rain falling, birds singing, bread baking, and how. The pencil marks, the chalky pastel sweeps, the liquid rainbows poured from a brush, and stick drawings that tell agonies and ecstasies. I understand. I am with you in these times and places, seeing the sights, feeling the touch, hearing the sounds, smelling the fragrances, with you, empathizing with you, accepting you. And when we reach the perimeters, your limits and mine, our boundaries holding us safe, You take your page with you, and I take mine, noticing the marks we made on one another's. The confusion you felt, I say, offering myself as your
Oh
reflection.
my goodness. We'll get there in the end. Okay, so I need to stop sharing the screen. Here I am. So we're still recording. You may notice that there are some jolts in between the recordings and the playing. That's because I've edited this recording to ensure that anything that was on my screen that may have been recorded isn't, unless it was relevant to the presentation. So I hope you enjoyed my film. I hope you enjoyed the poem too. I really allowed myself some space to be vulnerable in that. I know I'm no great poet. I know I'm no Da Vinci art-wise, but in lowering my guard and being vulnerable and being authentic, I actually think that what I created was far more congruent and valuable to anyone looking at it, in the way that counselling, the being congruent, the being vulnerable and genuine, allows a modelling to the client that it's acceptable to be raw and vulnerable. And so I think that conveyed for me in the process of making the art. So I want to talk about the different techniques that I employed to make that video. I think that the easiest way for me to do that would be to play it again and pause it and talk over it while I explain. And again, I will be editing out the awkward bits. Okay, so I'll share that again. So this is the video editing program on the Apple computer. It's called iMovie, and it's really very user-friendly. I'm not going to do a full rundown of how it works. That could be a different workshop altogether. But you can see at the bottom here, as I move across the screen, that it's essentially sequencing different images and using the program to connect them in a pleasing way. Let's just say that. So if I enlarge that and then go back to the beginning, sorry about that. So this initial image was a sketch done with pen and ink. See as I move it along that I blend that into the next one. And this is a digital image that I'd drawn on the iPad. So already I'm using two different techniques. One is real tangible art, pen and paper. And the next is digital art. And I love the iPad. I love digital art for exploring and journaling because there are so many techniques at your fingertips. And you don't have to have a well-stocked art room, although it does remove some of the tangible, embodied experience of creating art. On the other hand, it's mobile, so pros and cons. Next image was drawn on a post-it note and was significant to me during the training progress because the doodles that emerged for me changed quite dramatically and became more complex, like this one, for example. Just the kind of freeing drawings and art that happened for me that were very similar to my childhood scribblings, and that primal mark making and choice of colour that emerged was quite significant for me. I noticed repeatedly that these motifs of little dashes and dots appeared in my different pieces, and I began to think that maybe they have meaning, really implicit meaning, that I still haven't fully understood. And so here's one of the illustrations that I did. Sorry, that's a bit fast. There was a series of sort of cartoon illustrations that I wanted to break down the different stages of the PCAP process. And including the writing was really to make explicit my understanding, because this was part of the portfolio. I wanted to meet those criteria. This was an art journal piece that I had done. Actually, no, it wasn't. This was a piece that I had done after one of our visualization prompts during training. I particularly love this one. Again, it's another piece that I haven't fully understood for myself, and sometimes allowing myself to not fully understand what emerged is really valuable. But I'm especially fond of the gradient on the blue, and I still have it, excuse me, I still have it hanging up so that I can look at it frequently. So this piece was another doodle while I was listening to the training, and I'd actually done my visualization already. And this was just leftover paint, and you see this dots and dashes motif came out, and curiously there was this little diamond kernel in the center of this maze, and I realized what it represented was something quite personal for me, but it was the fact that this cannot escape any of this without creating some disruption. And so all of these different stages, this was another visualization, and this one too. This was an art journal piece. This is another illustration. Here's a video clip that I had made last summer, taking a walk. I saw some bees entering the tree and on the reflection. I'm just skimming through to try and capture the different images. So this one was made, excuse me, on the iPad. On a Procreate program, there is a tool that allows you to make short GIFs and animations. There are loads of YouTube tutorials on how to make these, and that's where I learned how, just trial and error, experimenting using the program. But I think that it was particularly useful to be able to switch between the different animation styles. And then here are photographs. And this is another animation that I made using the iPad, this little process here.
Window glass to your tired, harried face as
you can see that it's frame by frame.
The changing room mirror.
And how effective it is to play with the perspectives and to move from the close-up on the individual's face and to build the image like that and then have it moving. The same with this lady here. So illustrative. And the little tiny details like the flare around the light bulbs and the movement of the arm alone. It was really powerful for me, really significant. And bringing in these other clips were meaningful for me because I was drawing upon points in my life that were significant. Now this is another piece made on the iPad. When you draw a picture on the iPad on the Procreate program, it automatically records the stages that you have made your image with. So you can see how the drawing evolves.
Over mountains. I hear you mention your highs.
And simply by using that as a video, you can build up the layers, almost the stages of process really, really rapidly. You can see how something builds up and becomes an accomplished and finished piece. More sketches that I've done, just meaningful illustrations. The bread making GIF I particularly enjoyed was a real labour of love because having to remember to change the timings.
And how?
But again, done on the iPad. So all of these stages where the image is panning out, this is all part of the iMovie package. I'm not trying to sell Apple products, but just explaining what I used. This was stop frame animation. So I bought an arm that attached a clamp to my desk that I could fix my phone into. And then I would do each letter, each stage, take another photograph, do another stage, take another photograph. Now on most smartphones, on the camera and film section, you can actually choose slow-mo type filming, which gives the illusion of stop frame. So I could have run that whilst I was drawing, but I wanted to do it in a very organic, controlled way. And I'll come back to that in a moment, but those choices about whether to use the automatic function or to take control myself, to be the master of what step happened next. Those are the significant bits for me about understanding filmmaking with the person-centered creative art therapy. So we come to the end, really. It's just more of those. So let me get out of the screen sharing and go back to the normal bit. So here I am back again. So different techniques, different media can be drawn together to make the film. What I want to share with you really explicitly is not my amazing artwork. Some of it's amazing, some of it's not, but is the process and how, if I was working with a client, which I haven't done filmmaking with a client yet, but if I was working with a client, I would be asking, well, maybe I wouldn't be asking exactly, but I would be wanting to focus on with the client why they'd chosen the style of animation that they had, or the style of filmmaking. Was it, you know, and I'd be looking for answers about convenience, about control, about accessibility. And that would give me a sense of where the client is at in their stages of functioning. So somebody who wanted to have very tight control over what they were creating, that might represent a sense of needing control over something in general. So I'd be working with that as a metaphor. If the client was bringing together lots of different aspects of their life, I'd be thinking this is an integration of different parts of self being represented in a one. I'm not going to imagine that that's the same for every client, but they're the sort of indicators. And then again, looking more closely at the media that they've chosen. So it could be the stop frame, taking photographs of working with pen and paper. What is it about wanting to use the tactile, real media to touch it, to have that relationship with it, versus wanting to use the iPad? Is it about convenience? Is it about being able to take it on holiday? Or is it about not wanting to engage in a tactile way with real media? There are no judgments within any of those inquiries, but they're the indicators of where a person is at. So for me, wanting to really engage deeply with the 5 stages, I chose one of my favourite media, which is pen and ink and gouache and watercolour, to illustrate my little cartoon style document. But for capturing fleeting moments and simply when I did the reflective, within the poem, within the film, there are some clips of the water reflections. For me, they were just really straightforward visual metaphors that have low process meaning for me. In a sense, you know, I found them beautiful. I captured them on my phone. They were convenient to use to illustrate something. So in the same way that we might use an old hackneyed metaphor and say, a terrible one came to mind then, one that was probably quite inappropriate, but let's say, oh, I'll eat my hat. It's a very shared metaphor. So it was just a very shortcut to conveying part of the message. And although that could be significant for a client, it might not be. So what I'm trying to say is that not every visual image has deep significance to the client within the film. And when I say the client, I'm talking about me working with me at this point. But I'm extrapolating and imagining that might be the case with clients using art therapies. Based on the fact that my own process with talking therapy can't be fully translated to my clients, but there are similarities, and certainly I would be curious about my clients' work in the same way that I reflect and I'm curious about my own process. So that's really what I'm getting at. I I don't know that I have that much more that I can explain in this closed presentation, this recording. What I would like to do would be to work with questions to answer, because I think your curiosity might actually draw out more information. I feel a little bit that I've tried at this point. So I'm going to pause the recording now and hope that if for any terrible reason that I was not able to do the presentation live with you, that this has given you a little bit of insight into what working with film can look like. And if there's interest, then please let me know through Outcat, and I will look at doing another workshop, one of the free workshops with Annie and Callie and so on, and we can cover this in more depth. So thank you very much. I hope that you enjoy the conference.